June 10th, 2010, or April 6, 2012 here in the United States, marked the release of Xenoblade Chronicles, game director Tetsuya Takahashi's next venture in the overarching Xeno series under the banner of Monolith Soft. The game's monetary and critical success led to a number of sequels, bringing us to the most recent piece of content, Xenoblade Chronicles Free: Future Redeemed, which looked to end the saga of games that started all those years ago. With the promise of returning characters and locations, as well as the opportunity for players to dive back into Xenoblade Chronicles Free's world of Ionios to learn more of its secrets, the potential it contained was extraordinary. Try as I might to temper my expectations, I fell prey to the hype cycle, and eagerly waited for what this DLC presented and an opportunity to strengthen my opinions on the base game, just as Torna had done 5 years earlier. As I currently speak, I've sunk plenty of time into the expansion and completed the story, which raises the question, how was it? Well, I have a lot to say. This video will be spoiler-free for Future Redeemed. However, Xenoblade Chronicles 1 through 3 are fair game. I will also have a section containing Black Mountain-sized spoilers for Future Redeemed right before the conclusion. I will give a warning before marching into that territory so people who haven't been able to play it or are still going through it can enjoy this video and freely skip spoilers. Finally, if you enjoyed this review and are interested in more Xenoblade content or story-based analyses, consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel to see when new videos drop. Anyways, let's kick this review off with Future Redeemed's gameplay. As you might assume, a lot of the core gameplay mechanics in this expansion are taken straight from the base game. So, I plan to quickly summarize my thoughts while expanding on the new or adjusted components. Xenoblade Chronicles Free's combat is quite polished, and likely tops my list, only being surpassed by Torna's system, which might simply come from how the Kevis arts in Xenoblade Chronicles Free can kill the flow of battle. The high level of customization, new movement options, and beautiful animations all contribute to a cohesive system, which feels rewarding. Although I am an advocate for always presenting the player with options rather than not, I can find myself intimidated by games that contain multiple different stats, skill trees, and a lot of other various mechanics. As Future Redeemed's runtime is shorter than your average Xenoblade title, systems were streamlined or cut out, such as class switching for your characters. Matthew is always going to be an attacker, and A will always be a healer, which does limit some customization, and I completely understand how it might be disappointing for some people. However, I honestly love how the systems are incorporated into this DLC, and it allowed me to spend more time on the systems that do remain, but are handled in a different manner. For example, arts are no longer upgraded naturally through leveling, but are a part of the new affinity growth charts, where currently owned arts can be improved, new arts can be gained, and skills can be added to your repertoire or enhanced. It's kind of like Xenoblade Chronicles 2's affinity chart, but instead of doing objectives to upgrade skills, you can choose which skill you want to have at that current point in time by allocating affinity points. This is where I start to fall in love with what this title does gameplay-wise, because AP is collected through numerous different ways that are all baked into the world and split into 3 different categories: exploration, battle missions, and affinity scenes. Killing enemy types, viewing touching affinity scenes, discovering relics. Essentially, you are rewarded for exploring and immersing yourself in the world beyond just experience points and the usual gear found in said containers. This is probably the best incarnation of side quest rewards this series has done, and I felt a real tangible reward for my efforts that offered a sense of progression. These avenues of gaining AP bleed into what is undoubtedly the game's central progression system: affinity goals. With 6 different categories to 100%, there is plenty to do, and due to the organic manner these each fit into the world, as well as the frequent feedback given to the player on their progress as they work through the checklist, this is the most absorbed I got into doing the side content in a Xenoblade game ever. It felt like shrines in Breath of the Wild, in the sense that it was like a beacon I couldn't avert my gaze from if I knew I had spotted something new. Should I have beaten the story as soon as possible to minimize the chance of seeing spoilers? Yeah, that's admittedly the logical choice, but I was having so much fun clearing out objectives, and my lizard brain really appreciates victory jingles and items getting crossed off a checklist, so I just couldn't bring myself to skip them.
It checks out.
If If I am opting to do side content in a game and not speeding toward the finish line, then I know I've been immersed into the world and it's a game that's successfully gotten its claws into me. Speaking of progression, Torna's community system also returns, but in a manner that shows that they've taken in past criticisms. The community, while a neat idea that fit extremely well into Torna's narrative centered on a sense of unity that was doomed to be broken, had one major hiccup in its design, which was the progression gate needed to enter the final area. This could lead to a pacing killer that was a few hours of side quests for an unaware player. It's not terrible, especially if you know it exists, but I believe Future Redeem made the right choice by completely eliminating it, and the pacing is all the better for it. But what about the exploration and the world this time around? Well, I already spoke on how affinity goals incentivize exploration in an excellent manner, yet the world is also worth exploring because it's well constructed, both from a level design and aesthetic perspective. I'm not going to discuss specifics here, but the trailers showed a glimpse at what some of these locations might be, or are composed of, and longtime fans of the series are gonna greatly enjoy what's on display. That's not even purely fan service either, since a majority of environments repurpose existing materials in a fresh manner, just like the base game did. The addition of repairable ladders, elevators, and other objects also feels like an adaptation of the base game's overworld abilities, but more simplistic in focus and less Metroidvania-like. It obviously wasn't a major focus, but they wanted to give the overworld some sort of progression. As a result, I do believe it is less interesting than it is in the base game, but it still does its job. What I do know is that people could analyze this stretch of Ionios for years, and likely still not pick up on everything, as it must have been designed with the most attentive eye for detail. While I have heard some conversation about the Black Mountains being a pain to explore, I honestly did not feel that at all, and thought quite the opposite, with its vertical progression being uncommon, yet ironically true to environments previously like it. And, of course, hearing the characters talk about the world via the affinity views, utterly brilliant. These were some of my favorite interpretations of the heart-to-heart mechanic throughout the entire series. And what are also consistently brilliant are the series' soundtracks. In a similar fashion to Torna, this expansion doesn't have a staggering number of songs, but everything that is new is incredible. And I do mean everything new. While I grew to adore Capricorn Peak and Arafia Sea's themes in particular, some of the location songs in the base game are more atmospheric or subdued in nature when compared to the strong presence of those in series' past. That's not saying it's a bad thing, but some people have a preference for the older style, and if you did miss that, you're in for a treat. There are also a couple surprises and motifs hidden within the lineup for keen-eared players. It's only been a couple weeks since the DLC released, and I can already say that a number of these songs are extremely memorable and have been floating around in my head for hours upon hours. Both the day and night themes for Aurora Shelf are exceptional, and Black Mountain also presents such a great variation between its two themes. The most memorable song is likely the game's lyrical track, Future Awaits, which beautifully encapsulates the ending to this saga, and contains a couple surprises. Most notably is that it features Joanne Hogg, the same singer of Xenogears' Too Small of Pieces, and some Xenosaga songs. With her return and the familiar instrumentation, it really carries the spirit of Xenogears through and through, which puts a dumb smile on my face. Now, to close out the sound section, there is one problem that's my civic duty to address as someone who makes Xenoblade content, and that's the chain attack music. I have no idea how the hell this didn't get updated for the DLC, but this song still interrupts every boss encounter, with the exception of the final boss. Unfortunately, I believe we're past the time where it could get updated, but removing its ability to interrupt boss fights or even a toggle for the chain attack music would fix this issue almost completely. And actually, you know what, while we're on the topic of annoying sound effects, can we please talk about that really annoying high-pitched bird sound effect? I have not seen anybody complain about this, but oh my god, it drives me insane! I thought I was going insane in the base game when I was hearing it, thinking it was something outside, but no, it's just in the game! And it's back, but they also put a space between the two parts of the sound effect? I just don't understand it. I really don't, but it bothers me. I hope I'm not the only one that shares this sentiment. Okay. Anyways, let me calm down. If you have heard my thoughts on Xenoblade Chronicles 3's base game, you'll know that while I enjoyed the story, it was the area that left me the most disappointed, primarily due to the lack of star power after the big moment with N in Chapter 6's introduction, an overall weak villain ensemble, and missing exploration into some plot elements. Based on the trailers, Future Redeemed appeared as if it would rectify my issues with the base game. However, as I stated earlier, I tried to temper my expectations. The basic premise of the story is after an attack on his home of the city, our protagonist Matthew and his companion A are looking for its scattered residents, particularly his sister Nael. This journey leads the two individuals to meet a number of people across Ionios, make new allies, and discover the truth behind this war-torn world. The expansion assumes you've played the base game, and therefore doesn't spend nearly too much time on the bigger reveals and world-building details presented in that narrative. Since a lot of the cast deals with people knowledgeable on such subjects, the story and side material can spend most of its time focusing on the personal experience of characters, the newfound fostering relationships, and aspects that the base game didn't delve into nearly so much. And now, with Future Redeemed behind me, I'm here to admit, I was completely right to have so much faith in this expansion. Now, not every criticism I had has been solved, but a very large majority of them have been satisfied, and it scratches that Xeno itch perfectly. This DLC manages to recontextualize plenty of elements on display in Xenoblade Chronicles 3's larger narrative, and only in a positive fashion. The stronger elements are only made better, and those I found lacking have been filled sufficiently. This story goes places. I won't say anything else regarding that because who am I to deprive y'all of that experience, but if you thought Xenoblade Chronicles 3 was missing something, take my word for it, I truthfully think this will change your mind. A lot of this game's narrative and overall success does come down to the cast, and no shocker, they nailed it again, and this is one of the best put into a Xenoblade game. Yes, 1/3 of the main party is returning characters in Shulk and Rex, but they are so wonderfully implemented into this story. While they feel true to their characters in their games of origin, with Shulk being a level-headed, empathetic individual at heart, and Rex being a more brazen goofball, they also exhibit a natural progression of those personalities, with Shulk acting as the mentor of the group just like Dumban did, and Rex becoming overprotective of those he cares about, and that can come across a little strong. I'm always very concerned with characters being brought back after their arcs have seemingly come to an end, but I firmly believe that their presence here is rather justified and something I could be happy with. Shulk and Rex aren't the only good members though, as Glimmer and Nickel are pretty fun on their own. Sometimes they do feel less developed than others, but their roles in the narrative are important for illustrating the world of Ionios and developing other characters. Finally, we have the stars of the show, Matthew and A. A works very well with Matthew's personality, as A's dry, matter-of-fact speaking perfectly pairs with Matthew's heart of gold, act first, think later mentality. A is pretty great, but I absolutely adore Matthew. Legitimately one of the best characters in the series, and his accent really helps. There's one cutscene where his accent is really going full British, and kind of sounded like a Jamaican accent strangely enough, but it had me dying. All of these characters also have interesting, fun designs that have levels of depth to them, especially in the case of Shulk, Matthew, and A. The villains are also pretty solid this time around, something I criticized about the base game with the exception of N. I won't say that this is the best ensemble of Xenoblade villains, but it does its job quite well. They represent something interesting or offer a fresh perspective that I found to be noteworthy. Yet, at the end of the day, N is still the best of the bunch in my opinion, made even better by this expansion, and is overall one of the best characters to come from Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Nevertheless, not every villain is given the same love and attention, which left a lot to be desired. I'll leave it at that, but this would be one of the aspects I wish was fleshed out more. Alright, at this point I'm going to be entering my spoiler discussion of Future Redeemed, so if you want to skip ahead to remain spoiler-free, head to this timestamp. Alright, here we go. So as I mentioned earlier, this story goes crazy. I don't even know where to begin, so let me just rattle some stuff off. I love how Ontos is utilized in this story with the split into Alpha and A. Alpha preying on Nael's emotions and using her as a vessel just like Zanza did to Shulk was such a brilliant idea that felt earned and well implemented. Going back and watching the flashback with N stabbing Gondor is also completely recontextualized with further proof, just like how the opening of Xenoblade Chronicles 1 is when you know the Bionis was the true aggressor. Going back to Colony 9 and hearing the familiar theme followed by a remix when entering the colony itself gave me goosebumps. And maybe the most subtle of these details, but one of my favorites, when Rex was talking to Glimmer and said that the reason he does all of this is because he just wants to see smiles on people's faces, referencing what might be my favorite line from Xenoblade Chronicles 2, pure bliss. All of these tidbits I'm listing are just a few examples pinpointing how Future Redeemed is a beautiful love letter to the series' history. Hell, even some of these side quests reference those from the original Xenoblade Chronicles, like fixing the watch. I'd be here all day if I went through every one that I loved, but it made this truly feel like the conclusion to the Klaus saga I thought I was going to get with the base game. They also addressed a number of the complaints I previously had regarding a lack of answers. Admittedly, the explanations were very brief and might not satisfy everyone, but Ouroboros powers manifested not just as a result of Nia's core and origin metal, but because Numa's core is also a part of the equation and revealed via Matthew's gauntlets? I won't lie, it raises a lot of other questions, but okay, I can buy that. The most mysterious Napan Riku is the child of one that traveled with Melia and Shulk, which would most likely be Kinu from Future Connected due to the fur coloration. Very casually addressed, but I'm with it. Yes, some questions remained and were presented new ones, like where the hell did Matthew go at the conclusion, but I'm strangely more okay with that since it feels less integral to the core mechanics and systems used in the game. Furthermore, I was stunned seeing the party whisked away in the final hours to a place that looked similar to like a mountainside in California. I am an absolute sucker for placing fantasy characters in an unfamiliar environment that takes the form of something tonally distinct from the rest of the game, or take the form of something all too familiar to us. Elysium, although destroyed, is a great example of this with its church, highways, and playground. When it was revealed to be the world before Klaus's experiment, when we get to see the beanstalk stripped of its world tree shell, God, that is everything I wanted! I made a video before Xenoblade Chronicles 3's release stating how the thing I wanted the most from that game was the conclusion to Klaus's story, even if he doesn't appear. I was honestly disappointed to find that wasn't the case, but turns out I just had to wait for the DLC to have my wish granted. Alright, so, enough gushing, let's address the radio in the room. Unfortunately, I have not played Xenosaga, so I didn't have an absolutely insane reaction to the reveal of the Vector logo on the radio, nor the mention of Dmitry Yuriev like a lot of superfans I know did. I recognized in my head that this might be Xenosaga related, since the discussion of ships holding cities worth of people in space sounded very familiar to my cursory knowledge of the series. Or Wall-E, but I was mainly scanning the text for the slimmest of all chances that this information would denote Xenogears being canon. When I saw the mention of Philadelphia-class motherships departing the Milky Way galaxy, I did pop off a bit, since that is exactly what the Eldridge is. Regardless, despite the references and mention of things from Xenoblade Chronicles X, Xenosaga, and Xenogears, I really do believe we're looking at Xenosaga becoming a part of the official canon, and I feel the mention of Xenosaga on the intellectual properties listing for the DLC, and apparently not the base game nor Xenoblade Chronicles 2, is just further ammo for that belief. By the time this video has been released, I likely have started Xenosaga and will be sharing my thoughts on that journey on social media as I work through it, and I'll talk about it on here once I'm finished. Who would have thought that a radio in the background of a conversation would have created such a staggering ripple effect on the community and fanbase as a whole? This was the birth of a universe moment all over again for longtime fans, and although it certainly makes me happy seeing those fans rewarded, and even myself getting excited over the incredibly small Xenogears reference, I'm jealous of you guys. I couldn't experience this moment at its full potential. Yet, at the end of the day, I was still able to walk away from Future Redeemed feeling completely content and with a big dumb grin on my face.
You're standing at a loss in front of a door that's been closed for so long.
As I currently sit here, thinking back on everything Future Redeemed does, the Xenoblade Chronicles series as a whole, I don't think there's any better way to describe it than how Future Awaits does it. Standing here at a loss. I cannot fully put into words how bittersweet it is to work on this review knowing that the Klaus Saga, this journey that started over 10 years ago and nearly 8 for myself, has finally reached its conclusion. Before Xenoblade Chronicles 2, I never would have imagined this series would take this direction, and I'm just astounded by how consistent it has remained, all leading to Future Redeemed, a culmination of everything Xeno. It not only amplifies the experience of Xenoblade Chronicles 3, but is one of the best pieces of content to release for the series. Do not view it simply as a burst of fan service for the sake of fan service's sake, as the full experience is much more than that, and definitely earned considering the series never fell out of good grace and has remained a shining beacon in the JRPG genre. This DLC is a love letter dripping with passion for anybody who has been following this series, and the truth is that you're only going to get the full effect if you have played through the previous titles up to this point. If you have, you truly owe it to yourself to play it. I promise you won't regret it. As a result, I'll be giving Future Redeemed a very strong 9.5 out of 10. It has some problems, but most of them are mild annoyances, or completely overshadowed by all of the strong components in place. As a conclusion to the saga and a bridge to the future, this is a knockout. But those are my thoughts on Future Redeemed. Obviously, I absolutely loved it, but what did you guys think? Did you share the same opinion? Were there aspects that disappointed you? Let me know in the comments, and I'll be sure to read through them. This time of the year is pretty busy for me, but I have a lot of other ideas for Xenoblade content that I'd love to share with you guys, as well as a character analysis for another series that I put on hold with the announcement of Future Redeemed. I will get back to that soon enough. Stay tuned for those though, as I'm excited to get them finished. Anyways, thank you so much for your time and support as always, and until next time.